apparently, coincidentally, we are now getting a report in that Israel and Hamas have agreed to a hostage deal in the Middle East. This, of course, has nothing to do with President Trump taking over in 5 days. In fact, the Lincoln Project has already tweeted out to say President Biden has successfully convinced Israel and Hamas to agree to a ceasefire and a hostage deal. Is there anybody on the planet that believes Joe Biden has done anything but, twiddle his thumbs for the last 6 months?
No.
This is outrageous that they're trying to, President Biden has success. No, President Trump taking over in 5 days and them not wanting to get bombed into oblivion is why the hostages were released.
Exactly. Trump had already said that beforehand. Get a deal done before the inauguration. Well, you've got a deal done before the inauguration. It's not a perfect deal. It may or may not last. He's going to have to do more diplomacy. But the Biden administration, what the hell did they do?
No, Joe Biden learned about this from a news alert at the same time the rest of the world found out about it. I mean,
congratulations.
I don't think he was involved.
Come on, man.
He learned about it from CNN.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think? I'll go to Hannah Claire first and then to Styx. What do you make of this? Like, it's obviously because Trump is taking over, but isn't it a little more insidious? Like, man, like this stuff, just like coincidentally, you'll see the Ukraine-Russia thing kind of dissipate almost assuredly. It's like, don't you think that Democrats look at that and say, oh yeah, like, do you think they'll give Trump any credit at all? Or are they just going to say that it coincidentally came to its natural end 4.5 days before President Trump took over?
I actually think a lot of Democrats will avoid talking about it at all, not out of loyalty to Biden, but out of fear of the division in their own party over the Palestine-Israel issue. I mean, we saw that they, right, like they can't message effectively on this. Kamala couldn't talk about it. Joe Biden really can't talk about it either. And so I don't think Joe Biden deserves any credit for any kind of peace deal. I totally agree with Styx. I think that we shouldn't look at this like the end of the conflict. I'm sure other stuff will come up. This has been going on for centuries. But Democrats are going to try and put this all behind them because they don't want a Trump win. And also they know they can't effectively message on it. So there's no benefit to them to talk about it. But again, it's not out of loyalty to Biden. I think I sent you the story earlier. Biden is lifting some sanctions on Cuba. Yes. And there are all kinds of Democrats being like, he's just trying to sink our party. What is he doing?
Yeah, that was bad. Because now they're going to have to answer for that in the midterms now.
Right.
What do you make of that, Styx? You think that we're just going to get total kind of radio silence on this deal getting done? Or will the media be forced to cover it? Because
they'll cover it. It's just that they're going to try to circle wagons at least a little bit. It reminds me of the Abraham Accords. The liberal media could not attack Donald Trump for the Abraham Accords. It was universal appraisal of it being a positive thing. So what did they do? Oh, well, the Abraham Accords just got signed. Bye. Here's the next news story. It was it's going to be exactly the same thing with this. And they're not going to admit that Donald Trump was instrumental in this or bring up the fact that he had told Netanyahu, get a ceasefire deal going before I'm inaugurated. I'm tired of this nonsense. They're not going to mention that at all. They'll simply say, under the Biden presidency, Israel and Hamas managed to sign off on a peace deal, and they'll leave it at that.
Never forget that the hostages were taken during the Biden administration, and then they were subjected to what can only be assumed as the worst possible conditions for the last 15 months under the Biden administration. If these people had feared Biden in any way, shape, or form, they would have not kept these people this long. If Netanyahu had, feared Joe Biden at all, if Joe Biden had even asked, I don't know if Joe Biden ever even asked. Like, do you think Joe Biden, Hannah Claire, do you think Joe Biden was ever like, come on, man, can we get these? Like, And why didn't he send I don't understand why he didn't send in, like, I'm sure it's an outdated term, but like Delta Force or whatever. Like get them out. Like why? I don't understand why Joe Biden just let it fest. They're American citizens in there.
Yeah, but they were pretending like we weren't going to get involved in this war, even though we were sending money over there and probably did have a military presence there. I mean, there was, I don't feel bad for him, but there was no decisive way for Biden to govern that wouldn't impact part of his party. And I think that he is not a good negotiator. I don't think, and obviously, like, he is not the one flying to Egypt or wherever to like be a part of these negotiations, but I think his administration is not in a strong position to negotiate on an international stage. And so he's not going to just randomly send in troops. He's afraid of upsetting Israel. He's afraid of upsetting progressive members of his own party by not being supportive enough of Palestine. I mean, at one point they built that huge floating base off the side, and then testified in Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin testified, well, we don't have boots on the ground. And you got that great clip of Matt Gaetz going, so we have boots next to the ground?
Yeah.
And then that whole thing was a multi-million-dollar waste of money. I mean, it's just another example. Right. It's another example of just the terrible excuse for international negotiation that the Biden administration has forced on us for the last 4 years. I think Trump takes a different stance because he is actually not afraid to upset people, whereas Biden knew that he was in a weak position and therefore didn't want to upset too many international potential partners.
Yeah, I don't know.
It reminds me a little bit of the Iranian crisis, actually. You remember under Carter, and it wasn't 100% his fault. No, the Iranian hostage crisis.
Oh, right. Carter. Yes. Yeah.
And Ronald Reagan gets elected. All of a sudden, the hostages are released. Amazing. Yeah. Imagine that. It reminds me, Donald Trump is looking more and more like a beefed up version of Ronald Reagan to me, which kind of makes sense because I think, weren't they actual friends back in the day, if I remember correctly?
Yeah. I mean, if we go, this is 1 week ago.
If those hostages aren't back, I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East. And it will not be good for Hamas.
Can you elaborate? No, I was pretty clear.
I feel like you don't need to elaborate on that.
Everybody knew what Donald Trump meant. Hamas knew what Donald Trump meant. That's why this deal got done. Like, the idea
instead of the slow adults being in charge, it's the actual adults being in charge at this point.
Yeah, I think it's funny that, like, there's also a difference in the fact that they believe him. Joe Biden will like saber rattle or whatever, but clearly Hamas believed him. Cat cam. Yeah, clearly
they just cry.
This is a leader, like, just without hesitation.
Hostages aren't back. I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East.
I mean, I think that they believed him. I think that Hamas was probably like, yeah, okay, well, we have, we can do it a few days early to try and save face. And by the way, that message was not just for Hamas, I don't think. That was him telling Netanyahu to get this done too.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that he's not saying, like, you guys have to work out a two-state solution or whatever else. He's like, no, I want the hostages, specifically any American hostages, I assume is the implication here. And that's the thing that I care about in this conflict. I think having these succinct goals is part of the reason Trump is a better negotiator. I don't know that the Biden administration was ever going to be able to go in and specifically, set up a perfect system for everybody involved. The objective should have always been to get the hostages. And it seemed like that only came up every once in a while when it was like, no, we really got to figure something out because the hostages. It almost at times felt like an afterthought to me. Maybe that's a little unfair.
Well, I think that Hamas remembered the time that he effectively dropped he dropped the fuel air bomb, the Moab there on the Al-Qaeda base, and just glassed it.
Yeah.
And I think when they thought about that, they said, well, the United States has tens of thousands of those. Maybe it's probably best not to lose our entire civilization.
And Trump has not had to, as Santa Clara pointed out, however you feel about the U.S.-Israel connection, and I have a feeling I know how Chad feels about it, Trump has not minced his words about it. So he doesn't have to worry about any backlash. He doesn't have to worry about like people getting upset. Trump has always said that he backs Israel. So he'll go in there and he'll glass a large area and say, well, there were some civilians that got caught in it. Well, blame it on Hamas. Hamas had 2 years to release the hostages. You got a problem with that? You got a problem with Hamas. I told him, like, that's how Trump will deal with it. Like he does not have to deal with the same level of scrutiny that Joe Biden would have had to, like, because a third of his party was vehemently anti-Israel, and that was like a little inconvenient. That was like their stepdaughter they kept in the basement, that reared its head a little bit on the college campuses and stuff like that. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I guess we'll have to see how this pans out. They said they have a deal done. Let's see if they release them. I suspect they will.